Welcome to you, Mother Truckers. We've got a real treat lined up for you today, The Learner. You sent in a couple of absolutely gripping flash fiction stories, and we're doing a pit stop to, unpack them. Empty Chamber and Blind Sight. Get ready for a roller coaster of suspense and some seriously clever thinking in the face of impossible odds.
Absolutely. These two flash fiction stories, they offer such a fascinating contrast in the types of challenges the characters face. One is a very immediate physical threat, while the other is something far more enigmatic and unseen.
Mm.
It really prompts us to think about where true resilience originates.
Okay, let's dive straight into Empty Chamber. So, The Learner, picture this town. Choked with dust, hope dwindling, and completely surrounded by raiders. The situation looks, well, utterly hopeless. And our central figure, Sarah, who's known as this legendary gunslinger, is down to her very last bullet.
Right. And what immediately grabs you is the stark difference between what the townspeople expect of Sarah. Someone like Mayor Pete
Right.
probably envisions her as their gun-toting savior, and her incredibly pragmatic, almost self-serving response. Reckon the only thing I'll be saving is myself.
It's a real curveball, isn't it? You have this figure built up as the hero, and her first thought is about her own survival. But let's consider the reality she's facing. A single bullet against an unknown number of attackers. What impact could a final act of defiance really have on the overall outcome for the town in that scenario? Maybe her pragmatism is a form of strategic thinking right from the start.
Yeah, that brings up a really interesting point about what we consider heroic. Is it always about this outward display of bravery, guns blazing? Or can true heroism sometimes manifest as a more calculated, less outwardly dramatic approach? Sarah clearly isn't just a crack shot. There's a sharp mind at work there as well. Notice how the story highlights that she takes a moment to assess the raider leader, suggesting she's looking beyond just the immediate threat of his present.
Right. And here's where it gets incredibly clever. Instead of impulsively firing that last bullet, Sarah opts for something completely unexpected. She calls for a parley. And her tactic isn't about firepower at all. It's a masterful piece of psychological maneuvering.
Exactly. She's clearly observant. The detail about the raiders looking a mite thirsty is crucial. It shows she's taking in her surroundings, looking for vulnerabilities. Then, the act of producing her empty revolver and subtly threatening the water barrel, implying she could destroy it with her non-existent shot, that's just a stroke of brilliance.
It's a pure bluff. She's exploiting their potential weakness, their need for water in that harsh environment, and leveraging her established reputation, even without any ammunition to back it up. That image of the empty chamber glinting, well, it must have been incredibly effective, a visual representation of a threat that might not even exist anymore.
Mhm. You can almost feel the tension in that moment with the raider leader. The story notes that greed warred with something more cunning in his gaze. He's weighing the potential reward against the very real risk that Sarah is telling the truth, or at least that the consequences of calling her bluff, no water, are too severe. That internal struggle she ignites in him becomes her most potent weapon.
And it works. The raider leader signals a retreat, and the town erupts in celebration, completely oblivious to the fact that their salvation hinged on an empty firearm and Sarah's quick thinking. The flash fiction story concludes with that fantastic line. Maybe legends weren't built on bullets, but on the brains to know when not to use them. What a powerful thought.
That really reframes the idea of a hero, doesn't it? It suggests that true strength isn't always about physical might or the capacity for violence, but often resides in intelligence, strategic thinking, and the wisdom to choose the right course of action, even if it appears to be inaction. The key takeaway here is that true power often lies in intellect and strategy, not just brute force.
All right, so we've seen how an empty chamber can be a surprisingly effective tool. Now, prepare for a complete shift in atmosphere as we delve into our second flash fiction story, Blind Sight. Forget dusty western towns. We're now in a city paralyzed by a silent, invisible terror.
Yeah, the contrast between the two stories is striking. In Empty Chamber, the danger is palpable. You can see the raiders. In Blind Sight, it's the complete opposite. The city is descending into chaos, sounds of destruction everywhere, yet there's no visible cause. And our main character, Mark, who is blind, becomes central to understanding this crisis.
What's so compelling here is how Mark's blindness, which might typically be seen as a disadvantage, actually becomes his unique advantage in this terrifying scenario. While everyone else is fixated on trying to see what's causing the pandemonium, Mark's other senses are acutely heightened, allowing him to perceive a threat that remains invisible to the sighted population.
Precisely. The flash fiction story describes it so vividly. shifting shapes against the backdrop of fear, a wrongness he couldn't see but could feel burrowing into the heart of the world. His lack of sight allows him to focus on subtle shifts in the environment. Sounds, vibrations, even a sense of unease that those relying solely on their vision are completely missing. The crucial takeaway from Mark's story is that limitations can become strengths, and our reliance on dominant senses can, well, blind us to other realities.
Of course, initially, his claims are met with skepticism. People naturally assume his perceptions are just a consequence of his blindness, a trick of his other senses in a chaotic situation. But then the security footage starts to corroborate his accounts, showing these bizarre distortions in the air that no one could consciously perceive. That must have been a chilling moment of realization for everyone else that the blind man was the only one who had any sense of what was actually happening.
It really highlights our inherent human tendency to prioritize visual information. We often trust what we can see above all else, don't we? It takes undeniable proof, like that security footage, to force us to consider other forms of sensory input and acknowledge the validity of different perspectives. And in this desperate situation, Mark, the man who was initially dismissed, becomes humanity's only beacon of hope.
Okay, so they construct this makeshift, almost desperate rig to translate Mark's heightened senses into data that the sighted can comprehend, maybe something akin to sonar or thermal imaging. And suddenly, this blind man is calling the shots, directing efforts on a battlefield that remains entirely invisible to everyone else.
Flank left, massing 2 blocks north. His commands, based on the information his other senses are providing, become the new reality for the desperate responders. The phrase human radar amidst a battlefield of the unseen perfectly encapsulates his crucial role. He's not a warrior in the traditional sense, but a vital strategist, guiding them through a world only he can truly perceive.
He essentially becomes this unexpected oracle, this leader born out of necessity. But then a disturbing shift occurs in the creature's behavior. They start to become more coordinated, their movements seem more purposeful, and Mark comes to a terrifying realization. They're targeting me.
Right. His unique ability to sense them, to provide accurate information about their movements, has inadvertently made him the primary threat from their perspective.
Yeah.
He's the anomaly, the one they can somehow see or sense in their own way, and they are adapting their tactics to eliminate his source of information. It's a chilling twist. His very gift has made him the prime target.
And in a move that seems utterly counterintuitive, Mark orders the destruction of the rig, effectively silencing his own ability to guide them. Why would he make such a drastic decision when he's their only hope?
His reasoning, while grim, reveals a profound understanding of the enemy. By removing himself as the central point of sensory input, he disrupts their ability to effectively track and coordinate their attacks. The attacks become more scattered, more desperate, as the unseen enemy loses its primary point of reference. It's a profound sacrifice, a willingness to diminish his immediate usefulness to achieve a greater, if uncertain, long-term outcome.
The flash fiction story concludes with Mark's grim smile. It's deliberately ambiguous, leaving us to ponder the full weight of his understanding. The underlying truth seems to be that he wasn't some gifted seer in the way the world initially believed. As the story states, he was the only one these creatures could truly see, and he'd made himself a target they couldn't resist.
It's a much darker, more unsettling truth than the initial narrative of the blind man as a modern-day oracle. It suggests a deep, almost intuitive understanding of the enemy's nature and a willingness to make a devastating personal sacrifice, not out of heroism in the traditional sense, but out of a strategic necessity for the survival of others. His perception wasn't simply a gift, it was a vulnerability that he ultimately had to manipulate in a different, more dangerous way.
So, the learner in this pit stop, we've journeyed through 2 incredibly distinct and thought-provoking scenarios, haven't we? A tense standoff resolved not with a shot fired, but with the strategic use of an empty gun, and a battle against unseen terrors guided by a man who couldn't see. Both Empty Chamber and Blindsight powerfully illustrate how strength and ingenuity can emerge from the most unexpected sources and in the most unconventional ways.
Absolutely. Whether it's Sarah's clever bluffing or Mark's unique sensory perception in the face of an invisible threat, these flash fiction stories underscore the remarkable human capacity to adapt, to strategize, and to find power in resourcefulness and unconventional perspectives when faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges.
We really hope these tales have given you some serious food for thought. What aspects of these stories resonated most with you? Can you think of other instances where the most powerful action was the one not taken, or where an apparent weakness became an unexpected strength? And have you ever considered the unseen forces, be they opportunities or challenges that might be at play in your own life? We encourage you to continue exploring these fascinating themes. Thanks for joining us for this pit stop of You Mother Truckers. Rate and follow the show You Mother Truckers for more captivating mysteries from the world of flash fiction.